Hi everyone and welcome to CG Buildup, and whoever is new subscriber, and welcome to CG Buildup. So today I'm going to talk about a geometry node that I made. Last time when I was talking about making clothes procedurally, I just was talking about making one single kind of a cloth, which was a simple vest, or some people can call it a simple basic bodice. Yeah, and every cloth that you're seeing right now was made using one geometry node. It's not like it's not like it uses a simple concept that makes one single kind of dresses, but it's just a certain node that can help in making some kind of clothes a little bit faster, especially making the base of the clothes. And this node that is called 3D, I named it 3D Stitcher. It's a node that simply makes clothes procedure. This is like the first step in making the geometry node making clothes using a procedural approach in making clothes. Okay, and this is called 3D Stitcher 1.0. I'll make higher versions later, because this geometry node was actually based on a concept that I had, a thought that I had actually, and that concept was I thought that what if we could make clothes procedurally using Blender's geometry nodes. Okay, something that has been on my head for quite some time, and I thought I wasn't cut out for it in the beginning because I didn't know much about geometry nodes, but I took a step and tried to think about it, how I'm going to do it to actually have that approach in making a cloth using geometry nodes, and I did it. And if you want this, you can grab the Google Drive folder via the description, and after that you can be off to go. It's cool, you can use it, and this video is just simply the instructions on how to use it. I'm not actually going to make any of these dresses that you're seeing on the screen. I'm just going to instruct you on how to use the geometry node itself. Before we start, a great shout out to a tailor's approach to cloth sewing, because its series is what gave me the idea on making all these clothes that you have right now. Okay, and this Blender file that you'll have will have three nodes, geometry nodes actually. One is the bodice maker, the measurements, and the 3D stitcher itself, the main geometry node itself. With that all said, you can jump into the tutorial. Okay, let's do this. So this geometry node that I made, the 3D stitcher, has these settings that you're seeing right now over here in the properties, and it has this thing called states, these things that here you're seeing right now. So the state is just the forms of the cloth when that this geometry node is going to give. The first one is the preparation state, which is denoted by 1, which has symbols for each setting that you use when using this. Because if I just mute this geometry node, you can see that originally this geometry was just made out of lines, and how it was guided to make a piece of cloth is through these vortex groups here that you're seeing right now that I made, I assigned. You can actually delete and make your own and rename, do stuff like that. These ones are the ones that I made. The handle, RSU, everything that you're seeing here has its purpose when making a cloth, right? And the preparation stage, which is the first state, has symbols that each vertex is given a symbol, like a torus, an icosphere, some sort of a star, or an X in some cases, or yeah, simple like that, just for telling you that this, if you have assigned the proper vertices and if it works correctly. So and these states, it's controlled by these two settings only, which is the radius and the height faces. The radius is these symbols, their sizes, you can make them bigger, smaller, or you can leave them as they were before. Then there is these hide faces. These hiding faces, meaning that the faces that you'll be seeing here are the ones that will be converted to fabric or piece of cloth in other states, because it has 4 states. The first one is the preparation state, which I'm currently talking about right now. Hide faces, it's a boolean, if you take it on, you can see some faces are gone, and the faces which are gone are going to be the final fabrics themselves. Okay, and another state is the sewing state, which is this one here. As you can see, in this state is where you can see if it has properly sewed correctly and there is no some sort of inverse going on, something I would show you, but this worked out well, surprisingly. And yeah, this is just the state where you will be seeing the sewing state, and this is the state where you cannot see the materials and you cannot fold. Okay, then the other one is the UV state, which is this one here. As you can see, these two pieces of fabric, which you can do something like a viewport 3D viewport 3D render, I think. Then you can take that image that you get from here in Photoshop, maybe, or any software of your liking in making textures. Then you can decide the material that you want for the cloth, and it will be stored in an attribute here that is called the UV name to the materials, and make your clothes look good by your designs by this 3D viewport render image. Then the other one is the fourth state, which is the final cloth. In here there are things like rotation, materials, setting stuffs to be smooth, I guess. So in this state is where you will see the everything that the final cloth set, all the settings that you kept will be final in this state that you're seeing right now. So let's talk about each of these settings right in here, and I'll go one by one, and so that you can understand how all this works. Okay, so I'm just going to go into the edit mode. I'm going to the preparation stage, which is the first one here, where you're seeing some spheres and whatever marks here. Then I'm just going to select everything and just delete, and I'm going to start a new one. I'm going to add in a plane, and if I go out of edit mode right now, you'll see nothing, because this 3D Stitches uses lines. It uses faces in some cases, but it mainly uses lines in order to make a fabric. Okay, and how you use these lines, and you guide the cloth in order to make the fabric that you want. Okay, using vortex groups. Okay, and this is like the first stage, that's why I called it 3D Stitcher 1.0. It's just an idea that I had a long time when I had a thought of making clothes procedurally in Blender, because I came to realize that sometimes making clothes in Blender is hard. So this is just an idea. Okay, this is the first stage. Maybe in the future we'll be using meshes, but currently we're just using lines in order to make a piece of fabric. Okay, so we have this plane. So I'm going to scale it along the X bit and scale it again along the Y. And I'm going to delete only faces, and you will see if I tab out, there is an actual face here, which means that it's going to be a fabric. If I go to other states, and maybe check on the wireframe, you can see that that face, that plane that we had, has been converted to a fabric. It has its UVs. Okay, this is the UV state, and so forth. Okay, stuff like that. So another thing that we have here is the handle recognizer. So I'm just going to duplicate this. Okay, Shift D along the X. Okay, for some reason I just want to scale this down. Can grab it, just something like that. then we have the handle recognizer. Because for example, when you're trying to make a cloth, and another way of making clothes is to imitate the real world. Okay, you might see a dress walk around the streets maybe, and you wanted to buy a certain dress for whoever you want to buy for, or yourself, and you wanted to make it. Okay, trying to see if you can do it in Blender, or yeah, simple like that. And among the thing that is most commonly in making dresses are the dress patterns themselves. And if you have not noticed that they have some shapes that are curvy, I thought in the beginning that I should use curves in making this 3D Stitcher procedurally system that of making clothes, but I found that curves, you have not enough control. Like they have no vertex groups, and even when you're applying the geometry, you have to convert it to a mesh, and meshes have vertex group which are very, I think, good. I can use for making, for having control, okay, in making the cloth itself. So I'm just going to grab this. I'm going to actually add in a vertex here. I'm just going to extrude, okay, somewhere there. So I want to make this vertex not participate in the cloth, but instead I want it to be participating in deforming this portion here, so that it can look sort of curvy. Okay, and the simple way to do that is just go to the, here there is a handle recognizer, and it has an attribute of handle, which is a vertex group in this mesh, which is, I just named it a handle. And if you assign right now like 1, nothing happens, or even you assign 0.5, nothing happens, because there are two types of handles in a curve, the left and the right. And how I set the system is that 0.1, anything like 0.15, 2, 3, whatever number is it, as long as it starts with 0.1, it will be a left handle. Okay, like this. If I do this, and you can clearly see it has deformed in this shape, but you might want to extrude and make instead of this to be for the left handle, you want it to be for the right one. You go to 0.2 anything, 0.2, 0.237, 0.263, there's no changes as long as it is 0.2. But 0.0, nothing will happen. But 0.1 the other way. I think, yeah, you get the point here. And I can extrude this one, and it can't be 2. Like if I assign this, it's not working. Okay, because there's already a handle that is the right. But if I go to the left side, you can see if I extrude another vertex like this, it won't participate in the cloth making. And in fact, you assign something to it, it won't work, because there can only be 2 handles for making this curved portion. So I'm just going to delete, and that was the shaping, you can say, of the 3D Stitcher, which uses handle by just this attribute here. Another part is the skewing part, which I'll talk later. There's rotation, there is the grid divisions, and there's this Boolean through. This one here, which is Boolean through, because I came to notice, especially in clothes, especially women, that you might find a piece of fabric, it's okay, everything is fine, but you can have a piece of a hole, a certain hole through the mesh, and you want to Boolean across it. Okay, so the way to do that is giving a mesh connected lines that can Boolean through that thing. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to add in a circle and scale it down something like here. Okay, so I'm just going to give it an attribute of Boolean through, okay, which is similar in this part of Boolean through recognizer. I just called the vertex group Boolean through and assign any number above 0, it's okay. And what I'm going to prefer right now is just to hide faces, the parts that are going to be fabric. And right now because I'm looking direct on the top, you don't see anything. But if I look from the bottom, you can see that it has sort of done this. And if I just grab it along the Z, it's still the same, but grab it down, it's still the same. But if I move it up, it shows this. Now if you see a thickness of such kind, okay, like when you look through a fabric, this thickness that happens like this occurs, then that's a good thing, because that means that your Boolean will be successful in the end. So for example, if I go to the string state, which is state number 2, you can see that the Boolean that we applied, that piece of mesh that we had for Boolean, has done this sort of stuff to cut through the fabric. And mostly it's best that you just use it for cutting through. You can also do like cutting this way to the very end, but I don't really suggest that, because that was not actually the aim of this. But that's something you can do, but it doesn't work well always. So yes, there is something. So I'm just going to delete this because I don't want to do a certain Boolean through. So that was the Boolean part. So another part is these grids, okay, something that is very visible out in the object mode. So there are two things. There is the grid reductor and the grid division centimeter. These grid divisions, and there's also this merge by distance, and also this spline resolution is just simply this curve form that you're seeing right now. How smooth it's going to be is controlled by this smart spline resolution. If I just set it to 1, you can see it's just, you know, straight down. But if I keep increasing it to higher values, you can clearly see it starts smoothing out this part. So yeah, simply that is the spline resolution, simply like that. So another part is these grids, which is the grid. I mean, I'm back to the grid reductor, grid centimeter division, and this merge by distance. But this is the part that I want to talk about right now. So in making a cloth, something that I came to realize is that if a fabric contains faces and edges actually, which are relatively similar to each other in most cases, and faces, their area is generally the same throughout, it's going to produce a cloth that is very believable, that looks more realistic compared to a cloth that has faces that are very different in terms of area and sizes of the edges that makes up the face. So I decided to make it uniform throughout, okay? And in these grid divisions, the lower you go, okay, the lower you go from there. For example, I was in -2 at first, and it formed this. And if I go lower, okay, go to like -4, it becomes blocky, and the faces generally increase in size of their area, and the edges also increase as well relatively. And the higher you go, for example, if I set it to 1, okay, it becomes like this dense. You higher numbers like 10, 20, whatever, just depending on your PC and its capability. It makes the cloth very detailed with so many vertices, and simple like that. The higher you go, the more the vertices, okay. The lower the number of faces and edges, and becomes more blocky and maybe less accurate. And sometimes it may ignore the shape because this is some sort of block retopo, certain kind of way that makes sure everything is a quad. But if it fails, it will make triangles, which are not actually much of a problem when it comes to making clothes. Mostly just make sure they're not merged together. In most cases, that's the case. So another thing is the grid reductor. So I'm just going to set this to -3, okay, very blocky. And what I want is that despite they have -3, is I want this one to be more dense, okay. The grid reductor, meaning that instead of -3, it makes these grids grids, that this face that we're having here, to be smaller, okay, relatively to the other. Let me show you. If I just click this one here, only a single vertex, okay, you only need a single vertex to make this work. And click on the grid reductor and just maybe type in 0.5 and something like that, and just assign. If I tab it out, you can clearly see that this one is more dense compared to this one here. Okay, simple like that. You can see that this is very dense. Okay, the faces are very small, while this one here, the faces are simple. And another thing is that you can't keep it 0. If you keep it at 0 and just assign, it won't agree. We can't make the faces that small. Your PC might crash. Okay, I'm really sure about that. I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm very sure that a PC can crash because of keeping it at 0. If I just make sure that the grids are very tiny to that level for any kind of face, it will be crashing if the faces are very small and simple. Okay, another thing is the merge by distance, okay, which is this one over here, which is right now set to 5, which is based on the fact that this mesh that you're having right now, it's like has a certain grid retopo system that leads to edges which are very small, which you might not need at all. Okay, I feel like I'm seeing one here. Oh, actually not. So in order to minimize that possibility of those edges happening, is this merge by distance. The higher the value, the more the less number of edges, the less number of edges in terms of sizes are merged, but the lesser, the more the more number of edges that are merged, something like that. It's based on relative size. Okay, just that's all that you need to know. Other thing that are down here is basically a material, and one is just for certain geometry node that I made for making sure this sewed part of the clothing, the vertices are actually merged. Another thing is the sewing system. Okay, this sewing system is based on a boundary of a fabric sewing to another boundary of a fabric. Let me simply explain. Okay, we want to sew this portion here, okay, to this portion here. What we're going to do is we're going to add 2 vertices, okay, these ones that I added already. I'm going to press F like that, and this edge right now is going to act as a link of this boundary, a certain boundary, from here to a certain boundary to here. But now it's actually messy right now, and it's going to be clearly seen if I grab this one here and grab it along the Z somewhere there and tab out, and it has become like this. Okay, very, very messy, because it's actually stringing the whole of this to the whole of this, but we actually want this segment, let me go top, this segment here to actually sew to this segment here. Okay, so that's how this system works. Is very simple. Is that this edge that you're seeing here will act as a link between these 2 fabrics, acting as a link of boundaries of either side, from this side to a boundary to this side right now. So, but it doesn't know from where to where from either side. So we want it to sew from here to this vertex, then to sew from this vertex to this vertex, meaning that I need to select this vertex, these vertices, okay, and assign something called the cut sew points, certain vertex group here, and any number above 0, simple like that. And then later select these vertices and this vertex and assign. That means that this portion here it's going to run from this portion, okay, and sort of imagine like there is a cut here, like this edge is ripped, this vertex is ripped, and this vertex is ripped, okay, then making it possible that this segment is going to be treated alone, and this segment here that I'm having right now is going to be cut is going to be treated alone, okay. Then this edge having here is going to act as a connection of creating like sewing lines going in this direction, okay, simply like that, based on this cut sew points that's here. And yeah, simple like that. If I tab out and maybe rub these annotations, remove these annotations, okay, simple like that, you can see that these lines have been sewed from this portion to this portion, simply like that, okay. But I'm wondering why it's perfect but it's not supposed to be perfect. I wanted it to be in reverse, something that instead of seeing what you're seeing, that it goes in this direction, okay, because I haven't discovered the right calculations for it. It can sometimes go in a reverse direction. Simply it can go something like this. Instead of starting from here to here, then continuing down till here, it starts sewing in the reverse direction, meaning that it starts from here, then goes here, then from there goes here, and the rest is simple like that. Something that can happen. And if you get that situation, that means that we need to add a vertex here, and that vertex, instead of acting as a portion to make a cloth, is going to act as something to reverse the sewing of this edge that is having that will have here like an edge link of sewing, that to repeat, to sort of reverse sew the process, something like that right now it's okay if I just assign the RSU to reverse as the one, that's the way that you're seeing right now. So just simple like that. This situation can be at default the moment you actually sew the cloth, but in our case it was perfect, so we don't really need this vertex at all. So like that, simple like that. And that's how the sewing works. It's based on a boundary for fabric to a boundary of another fabric. Another thing is this, so I already talked about the reverse sew and the cut sew points, okay. It cuts here, it cuts here, and cuts here, cut and cut depending on those vertices, and sews this segment to another segment, okay, simple like that. It's just based on boundary to boundary. Okay, another system that I have in this 3D stitcher is the mesh link sew and the cut sew mesh, okay, simple like that. So what does it do is simply the same in the sewing process of this mesh, but instead of using lines it uses actual faces, okay. So I'm going to add in a plane, and I'm just going to rotate it along the X by 90, okay. Now it's this huge, and I'm just going to scale it down, grab it in the middle, and I'm just going to scale it along the X so that it intersects these two fabrics lines, so these two edges that are having over here between two boundaries, okay. Then I'm going to duplicate it and move it to somewhere here, and I'm going to first talk about the cut sew mesh, okay, simple like that. Now instead of adding these cut sew points, okay, these boundaries of what we are linking that are going to be like the termination points of one fabric to the other, is simply the we are not going to add them manually by using it as a part of a fabric. We're going to actually form them by using these edges. And you can see, for I want just you to see for yourselves, and go to the vertex group and cut few points like that, and add in the weights like that. Not cut few points, actually it's cut few link mesh. Yeah, very confusing, and I'm realizing it right now. So if you can see, these stars actually are meaning for the cut few points are the ones that are not actually made by a vertex itself, meaning that I don't have to actually grab this and actually add in the cut few points manually to be part of this mesh, because sometimes, especially in sleeves, I get that occasional lot, where you don't actually, you want it to maintain that form, but you don't want the trouble of adding a vertex to make sure everything is flowing in the correct order. Okay, so when I'm going to just return that one to its state of 0, and I'm going to add in another one. Okay, and I'm just going to grab along this, I'm going to duplicate and grab it along the Y, and you can see the points are made, but I don't want it to act it as a certain way of these boundaries of the fabric, but I want it to act as a way of linking. Okay, like link, to make an edge that will link this boundary here to suit to this boundary here. So first thing that you must do and you must know is that one mesh has one function. Okay, if it's a mesh that you're intending to change the normal, don't give it any vertex group. If it's a mesh that you are intending to be as a boundary creator of a certain boundary mark of these cut you points, do not, you can give it that cut you points mesh, stuff like that. It's this one here. Okay, cuts you mesh and mesh links you. To mesh links you is for making the edges, that's instead of manually making that edge. Okay, because you want to maintain the form, simple like that. So what you have to do is just make sure it just has only that single information, not two information, like it has the mesh links you and the cuts you mesh. Don't do that. Okay, so it's this one here. Just going to set it to 0, and I'm going to assign it. I'm going to do this mesh links you, and I'm assigning it to a value greater than 0, and soon you'll see a line and a torus. Okay, simply meaning that you have succeeded to make this stitching process. I know it sounds intuitive and just needs a little bit of getting used to. That's all. It's not really that complicated. And if we move to the other one, and it still worked perfectly. I was really hoping that it doesn't work perfectly, because I think I can try to make it sure that it doesn't work perfectly. Okay, manually, and rotate it along the X by like this, and yeah, this is what I was expecting. This can happen. And as the initial one of this reverse U process, how to reverse this from ever happening is simply the same. Okay, it can also act as a reverse U, and you can assign that, and everything is now correct. Okay, I've not really figured out how to make sure that it's correct and it's not twisted. I have not yet figured that out, so maybe in another one that I'll make in the future. And that is the system of sewing. Now I think I'm done with that part. And other part is this rotation, the second rotation and the first rotation. Okay, for example, when you're making sleeves, you want to make it some sort of bend so that in the end of the day it sort of has a certain shape that can look like a sleeve. So there are two rotation, and these rotation are based on these grids, these lines, the direction of these grids. Okay, and for the meantime they can be a little bit complicated, meaning that they are not very they can be predictable in the, but they might not go in the direction that you sometimes expect. Okay, if I just rotate this maybe along this Z, okay, rotate along the Z, something like this, it looks fine, but even the grids, yeah, the grids went in this direction, which is not the direction that you might be expecting on how it is supposed to be when yeah, there's no such thing of the grid rotation at this point, at this time when I was making this node. So for the meantime, just get used to the system, this grid system, that just make sure it's facing a predictable direction. Like when if it's facing only the Z direction, the X or the Y direction, whether positive or negative, everything will be okay, and in most cases that is the case. Okay, but if you rotate it just in an angle, it's in some cases it will still give correct values, but in some cases it might not. So I guess that's the disadvantage, but for the current time it's okay. Now going back to the rotation, is that the rotation are based on this grid direction that you're having right now. So simply is that we are going to rotate it in a direction such that it curves and everything goes up sometimes, okay, or it curves and some things go, sometimes it goes in the other direction. I will simply show, just we and I'm just going to give one vertex, just a single vertex is required to control the entire rotation. I'm going to give the first rotation and assign. Now in this current state you won't see it, okay, you won't see in this state of 2, which is the sewing state, you won't see the rotation at all. Neither will you see it in the state of the UV state, but you will see it in the final state. Okay, you can see this thing, it has bended in that manner, and if I go into this, if I press N and see my items, it has this vertex here has final rotation, and if I keep increasing it, you can clearly see it starts to bend, it starts to sort of fold, I guess you can call it that way. Okay, it goes up and you go higher values like maybe 0.8, yeah, it rotates to that form depending on the grid direction. And you can, but if you give it also another one, a second rotation, and just assign, you can clearly see it doesn't work, because one fabric can only have a single rotation, you can only rotate it in one direction. So if I set this to 0, you can clearly see that it rotated in the other direction. So simply that. Okay, there is the first rotation, second rotation in this the vertex groups, and they are here in this first rotation, second rotation in this geometry node. So simply that, and we're done with the rotation. And the other thing that is left behind now is simply the materials. Okay, and I have currently given it a material already before even I started this tutorial, and these materials can only be seen in the final state. So if you go back to 2, where you can see the sewing and so forth, but you won't see the materials. The materials are only present in the final state, because material is like the final state, okay, but we do have some control over them. But I think also in this, yeah, also you can see them in the UV state, but in this final state, which is the state 4, you will see the materials. And as you can see right now, this fabric has some flowers, and this fabric can't be seen clearly. If I remove the wireframe, it has this pattern like for, I think, a tiger, a leopard. I'm not sure. I forgot that. I'm not sure. That's it, that it has these two fabrics have materials depending on what they are. Okay, they look like have different materials, different coloring, okay, depending on which fabric they are, but they have actually one single material, which the color on them is dependent on this attribute, which is the fabric identity, which can make you, for example, in some clothes, especially shirts, t-shirts, okay, which I guess I have it in another band file which I showed in the beginning. It's like this cloth over here, this t-shirt, okay. In the middle we have flowers. In the other side here on the sleeves we have a tiger. I don't know which animal is it, but I just found it cool and I kept it like that. So the sleeves have a different color, in the middle have a different color, and this was controlled by the same FID, same to this one here, whereby in the front we have two stripes. We have these zebra stripes, these tiger stripes, and on the very the portion behind is a texture that I found in Google, I guess, or if not Shutterstock, is this tiger and this zebra combined. I thought it would look good, and this one here for turtle scales, and this black, I thought it was really nice looking at this. Okay, so I made them like this, and the materials were based on the FID, the fabric identity, giving you the ability to control the material, the look on each fabric, depending on their FID, like which fabric is this and which material are we giving it, how is it supposed to look, simple like that. And yeah, that's all. Let me check if there's something else I have to say. The UV name, material, UV name is, I think it's very clear, UV name, attribute, stuff like that. I think if you are not that new to geometry nodes, you can guess where you can use that attribute, the attribute node in the shaders, which is this one here. I just named it here in the geometry node, and I can access it in the shaders by using GR, which is something that I think Blender should advance, is that instead of accessing only attributes in geometry, in the shaders, in other parts, we should also be able to access them in other parts, like pin groups. Pin groups should not only be based on vertex groups, it should also be based on attributes, because I wanted to make pin groups in this geometry node possible, but I just came to realize is that when you duplicate a face, the attribute of the vertex groups disappears. Just that, and that was the only thing that I required in order to make pin groups. And duplicating a face makes a vertex group disappear. You can test it out for yourself, and that made me a little bit down when I came to realize that, and I just stopped. I guess if it was single vertices, I guess I could try to do it, but for the meantime, I guess we can't do it. So I really wish that was possible, that we can make attributes affect other patterns, but not only vertex groups, which are everywhere actually. And that was all for 3D Stitcher. So if you found it helpful, subscribe, like the video, grab it. I hope you have fun with it, and I hope you will get to make cool clothes than the ones that I made mine here, because I just wanted to make dresses, that's all. And that was actually the main cause of making this geometry. And I know this geometry node is not that perfect. It can't make pockets and some other stuffs, but this is just the beginning. Okay, this is just a trial, that an idea that I had of making colors procedurally in Blender, something to make making clothes faster, easier than the way that we actually have, that we manually take a single vertex and merge it to the other, like that. Just a way that Blender could calculate for us. It might not be accurate in some times, and it does produce some shapes that are not good in some cases, but in most cases it's okay. I find it okay. I mean, I look at all these traces and I find it just fine on my case. So like, subscribe, share, comment, and I hope I improve in next time. Maybe you can make a call together in this channel. Thank you for your time.